Well, thanks so much for joining us today. Super excited to chat with you about just everything about your filmmaking journey. So this workshop, this is a group where we've been talking about personal docs. Uh,
hmm
and I know that you've recently started a personal doc journey, but before we get into that, I just want to say, congrats on your film Alive in Bronze. We just watched the trailer, and I'm going to encourage everyone to watch the film later. But tell us a little bit about what that journey was like making that film and how it's been, playing in festivals and the whole ride. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it sounds cliche, but when they say sometimes the story finds you, you don't find the story. Looking back, that's exactly how this happened. Used to work in finance in my previous career, and then got out. 10 years was a photographer, transitioned to filmmaking, and I just wanted to tell important stories with the skills I had acquired. And so I was like, documentary films is what I should make. I got into a film fellowship for young filmmakers of color in Oakland called Retake Oakland. And that fellowship was 2 years. So they wanted you to start and finish a film within the fellowship. The first year was focused on research and learning and meeting other filmmakers who made personal stories. And the second year was actually making the film. And during that time, I'd already realized as I was getting into docs that, they're not very sustainable. So I need a real job on the side so I can make documentaries. And so I went back into finance and got a job in 2019. That's the year I started the fellowship. About 8, 9 months later, we had a pandemic and there was a COVID layoff. And so this was the second time I had a finance job where there was a severance layoff and they give you a check and say, go do what you want. And I'm like, clearly the universe does not want me to work in finance. However, when I got that job, one of the things that happened randomly in the lunchroom was a lady was like, "What are you doing this weekend?" And I'm like, "I'm in this fellowship, and we have to find an Oakland-based subject to make a film about for a short." And she goes, Dana King lives there, and we did her deal last year for her Oakland space because I worked in real estate finance. And so growing up, she was a broadcaster on the local news and the only woman on the news who looked like me. So I thought she was Indian, but she's a Black woman who transitioned at the age of 50 from from broadcast to a career in becoming a sculptor. And I was like, oh, that sounds incredible. I used to really love her. I'll make a film about her. I reach out to her. She's like, yes, let's do this. But then the pandemic slowed things down. And what happened during that time was she gets this commission to make a monument to honor the first monument to honor the Black Panther Party. I'm like, are you kidding me? So this shitty job that I had to do for 9 months gave me a check, said, go do what you want. I was in this film fellowship and gave me the subject. So, at one time I was like, that was the worst job I'd ever had, but it was like, it came into my life for a reason. Then got the subject, started focusing on making this film. The pandemic was a very difficult time. I was like, for most of us, as you all know, I had had it. I immigrated to the country at the age of 12 with my parents, and I thought I was done living here. I was like, we need to go somewhere else. Everybody has problems, but they have different problems. And the film was a creative outlet that kind of kept me sane. And I devoted everything into it, ended up making a little short because that was a requirement of a structured program that helped me stay on track to get it done. Otherwise, it was such an emotional time. None of us could do anything really. So looking back, it was just a saving grace. And then, everyone tells you when you make a short, you're never going to make any money. And so I expected, I guess, I'm not going to make any money. But I had a severance check, and we were getting unemployment, and the fellowship gave us a lot of support with advisors, but not enough cash. Obviously, no one does, right? But I was like, I want this film to be my calling card, so I was able to invest about 12 grand out of pocket, and it was up to 15 by the time. And I was applying to every grant. All of them were turning me down, even though local Bay Area grants were turning us down. Maybe because the Panthers were too much. But after George Floyd, when the monuments were coming down and we're building a new one, the timing of the story suddenly became so important. So we got one grant by the time I got to rough cut, and that was 12. And so I was about still in the negative, but not as much. And that gave me a renewed hope like, okay, I can invest a little bit more money in getting this film out. So I was doing a lot of hustling in terms of just trying to meet film programmers. Again, timing. Very few festivals, big festivals, programmers have programmers of color. After 2020, they started putting the one or two programmers they had of color on their websites. So I was literally going through festivals looking for programmers, lobbying, sending emails, watch my rough cut, please program the film. And Tribeca ended up having a woman who I had met who's like, I do features, I don't do shorts. I'm like, just highlight it for your shorts programmers. 2 months later, they give her the job to program the Juneteenth screening because she's the only Black programmer in the whole event. So again, timing, and it's like Huey's spirit was there with me the whole time, just creating these serendipitous moments in times of just, a difficult period for everybody when I was down and like going out of my mind. The film ended up saving me. All the little creative steps that ended up coming is when I realized, like, regardless of what I do in life, I have to do filmmaking because it keeps me sane. It's like therapy. And so it was just fascinating. The ride. I called it For Love and Legacy because those were the two reasons the two women in my film were doing the work they do. Huey's widow is, an activist now. And Dana King still makes, as she says, black bodies in bronze. She's still an artist. So having these two women at the time that they were starting the stories just all coming together, it's like I was chosen or the story chose me. And it was just a huge blessing. And then having the program itself. So after Tribeca, again, it was like almost dead because a lot of small festivals programmed it, but Tribeca, some of the small festivals turned it down. And then once it got into the Juneteenth screening at Tribeca, then there was a renewed interest to show the film. But that day in that room, MTV documentaries, Sheila Nevins saw the film, wanted to buy it, came in hot, and then went cold. And I'm like, what is happening right now? Like, what did I do wrong? And it was just timing. So they saw it in June and then went cold and came back in November and bought it for the next year for 2023. So they pushed it for an awards campaign in 23, renamed it, relaunched it. Sheila Nevins was able to, make sure pay me a livable wage. So I was able to make a profitable sale, which is again unheard of for a short. But if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be making films anymore. I'd be out looking for a job. However, she also infused new life in the film by allowing me to buy archival footage, which was way too expensive. And that allowed me to bring Huey's voice into the film. So when you watch it, you'll see the archival that I had never seen before. And I wondered, why is this archival of Huey saying these things or the Panthers doing these things like not been part of my education? I did grow up at least high school onwards in the Bay Area, like 20 minutes from where the party was born. Yet I didn't know these stories. And I was like, how do we make sure our future generations know this stuff? Even if they ban the books or don't share it in classrooms. Film is a medium of supplemental education that can do that. So it was really exciting to work with Sheila Nevins to be able to create a new version of this film. And then they renamed it and called it Alive in Bronze, which is now on Paramount. So just last week, we were nominated for the NAACP Awards. Again, blowing my mind. Every time I'm like, how is this happening?
Yeah, amazing.
Crazy.
Yeah, well, there's so much that's inspiring about all of that from the beginning to through the whole ride. So just, kudos to you that it's been such a great ride and you totally deserve every bit of that. So now coming off of that film and thinking about your next project, you've told me a little bit about this idea that you have for a personal doc. Tell us a little bit about it and kind of like where you're at in the process, because we've been talking a lot today about how to start a film and what it's like when you're in the middle of it and at all stages. So we'd love to hear like where you're at right now in the process and about the film too.
Yeah, you never know what one film you make, what path it's going to take you on, what path opens up. One of the mentors for the last fellowship in which I made the film said to us, pitch your film in every format. You never know what's going to hit. And it was almost like getting permission because I came from corporate America. In a way, when you work in this entrepreneurial setting, a lot of those skills are transferable. And I remember thinking, why do I only have to make this as a short? Like, when they say there's so much material here, especially with the Panthers, right? So while I was raising money for that film or trying to raise money, I pitched it as a feature. I pitched it as a series because there's so many Panther stories that we don't know. And I happened to apply to one more thing, which I'm like, fine. And I ended up winning the least expected thing I was going to apply for. So it was a series competition through Series Fest in Denver. And it was judged by the gentleman who made Hoop Dreams. I
Steve
keep
James.
Steve James, yes, he's the mentor now, and Nat Geo executives. So they gave me very little. It's like 20 grand, like seed money to make a series. But I was like, but then this film sold after that. So now it's like, well, this can't be part of the series, but there's enough money to make another short, which I started, which was focusing on the children's perspective. So nobody has explored the Black Panther Party through the experience of their children. What does a child of a revolutionary really feel when the parents are out serving the community and not taking care of the child? Um, so that was a docu-hybrid personal approach that I wanted to test because the personal film I'll tell you about that I want to make, I'm still in the development phase because it's a personal story of how to do that. So while doing that short and winning this little series fest, I have a small short about the children's of the party as a school theater play and documenting the making of that play. So that'll be another short that I have in the can, and I'm trying to figure out how to put that together to try to sell another short so I could sustain myself while making my personal feature. So the personal feature is about women who are done waiting for the traditional path of marriage to work out, or just really want to have children, always knew they wanted to be mothers, but just are not taking the traditional route to do it because they're done waiting for it. There's always another person involved and you can't control people. So they're called SMCs, single moms by choice. And as I try to start that journey over the past year and a half, I've been meeting other women, and thank God for social media groups. There's a lot of private affinity groups, on Facebook, on meetup.com. So I've been part of this community now for almost a year and a half. And there's, incredible stories of women being like, I'm done. And it's fascinating to see, even in America, how much heteronormative our society is, and the rules are built in a way that, if you're outside this traditional structure, you are the other, and the way you're treated is just beyond me. So documenting that and not having it be like an angry, like, there's enough reason for women to be angry, but how do I not come across as these angry women, right? On their path to one of the most, transformative life journeys that they'll have. So there's a lot of time I've been spending in development for that film. And one of the main thing to remember is you never know, like I said earlier, where it's going to lead. You never know what creative thing, what person you meet, what conversation you have is going to pivot you on a path to that, telling that story in a way that it's maybe meant to. I recently attended European Film Market at Berlinale only because two of us from that last fellowship got free passes to go, and then we shared travel expenses to be able to. Because now that we've done the festival circuit in America mostly, we feel like we know how to navigate that. But if you want to try to premiere in Europe, meeting programmers and lobbying is the way to do it. And where do you meet them? So European Film Market was a great place to meet filmmakers and programmers. So we heard of a film there called Shahid that premiered at Berlinale, and it's a personal story told through auto fiction. And I was just fascinated. I haven't seen the film yet because I missed the screening, and it's been really tricky to wait and try to get in touch with the professor. But the trailer blew me away. And now I've kind of pivoted my personal story to be like all that anger and satire of society. The goal is to bring it in the doc through fictionalized, put a little comedic satire on it. And that way it still gives people enough to think about, but it's just a unique way of doing it. So, before going to EFM, I had no idea that I was going to do that. I'm also taking a class at the local community college for nonfiction script writing, just to process my thoughts, to learn how to write about a personal story with, where less is truly more. As you can tell, I talk a lot. I'm verbose, so I'm like, do I say less with more? I'm more say more with less words. So that class, again, that teacher showed us a different film made by a woman like 30 years ago about Ellis Island. And she used a very similar approach of this fictionalized accounts and like, with actors, and it's so beautifully done. And that line between documentary and fiction blurs. And he's like, the point of this is like, doc is fiction and fiction is doc. I'm like, what? So it's really fascinating to be able to it's like kind of like the stories we tell. If you've ever seen that film, that's another great film about, a
Yeah.
filmmaker and her family and the stories how we tell these stories. So there's just again, it's cheaper than therapy sometimes, sometimes not. But it's yeah, so I'm on that path to telling that personal story in early development, but I'm grateful for this time in development because now I feel like once I learn how to script my personal doc, which eventually I do want to make a narrative adaptation too, I should mention, which is another motivation for taking script writing, is not only writing the film for the doc, but also trying to write a because eventually a narrative adaptation because there's so much there in this space that just hasn't been explored. And as alternative families sort of take like start to become more of a thing, we have to make space for people to be seen, and to see those stories normalized is so important. Like, just quick off note, like I did these focus groups of men who could be about the topic of sperm donation for my personal film. And some of the things these guys said, I was like, holy shit, this needs to be a short doc in itself. Because, and one of them was a professor of visual anthropology. And he's like, I wish we would see more positive stories because my brain goes to all the negative things when it comes to sperm donation, which is so bizarre. And he goes, there just aren't enough stories. So unless we tell these stories to make space for everyone to be seen, it's like, how do we get there? So I
Yeah.
feel honored to be able to be at that precipice where I'm like, whoa, there could be a separate short about this, which could give momentum to the feature. So it's like a cool place to be. And this is the first time I feel like if I do my development work well, the rest of it will flow a lot easier and smoother. Last time I made the short, I just jumped right in and figured it out in the process. And that was also a great learning experience. But
Hmm.
it's amazing how it can set you up in different ways to tell different stories.
Yeah, thanks for letting us in behind the scenes on how you're thinking and approaching that, and kind of how you kind of always have to be juggling something at the same time to keep everything afloat and to keep things moving. So, like, what are some of your objectives in this development state? Are you hoping to get a little bit more funding before you start shooting something? Are you still trying to hone your craft on the writing side a little bit? Like, what to you are some of your goals that you have before you try to enter production on this thing?
You know, money is important, but as you become doc filmmakers, you realize you end up learning to do a lot of things yourself. So because I started as a photographer and can and film a lot myself, and I learned to edit because I had to, because I couldn't really pay editors early on, because I can do so much myself, I'm not as worried about getting money first, but it's more about figuring out exactly how I want to tell the story and film some cinematically beautiful stuff because I'm into making beautiful images with my photography and cinematography background. That I'm like, if I can see what I want to make and actually show that, even in like a 2 to 4 minute sample, that's what I want to accomplish. And of course have a plan to be able to pitch that well. So the main thing with this development for, again, very different approaches for the shorts of the Panther Cubs and the feature for my personal doc is for the short, we kind of, again, jumped right in. I got a writer to help write a story along some vignettes that I wanted to explore in the theater play. And we're like, let's just workshop it with the kids and film it and have enough that could either be a short or be a really good sizzle, but just have it done. And now we're figuring out story in post. However, for the feature, I really in this my goal is to create in development a plan for what parts of vignettes of the story are going to be fictionalized and what created with actors, how much of it is going to be like personal voiceover, kind of blended like if you've seen All the Beauty and Bloodshed by Laura Poitras, the
Yes.
way she just used voiceover with no talking heads and used old photos as a photographer, I was in love. And I had done a little bit of that before with my in my photo classes, sort of. But a lot of people in doc will be like, no, don't use still photos. And I'm like, why not? Laura Poitras did it now. Now you can't talk shit to me. And I asked about doing it. So I am blending some different styles for different parts of that story. And again, watching other people's work is really inspiring. I didn't go to film school. So it's like that's how I really figure out. And it's okay for me to now like giving myself permission because it's a personal story to tell it any way I want. At the end of the day, I want to document my story for myself and my family so my children can see what mom had to go through to make us a family. And it's important to share it with the world to make space for alternative families. So I am going to blend different techniques. So part of that is going to be my personal VO, how I show that with personal stories or letters to my future kids. How much of it is just, women sitting around and talking and sharing their microaggressions from having to go through this process, right? And how do we show that? And like, how do sperm donors talk about this stuff? So like just bringing in different voices and creating vignettes. So in the development phase, I'm just trying to figure out which vignette is going to take what approach and then film a little bit of a trailer to show. I luckily got into San Francisco Film's Film House this year. So the best thing about that is they have 10 fellows in narrative and 10 in doc, and we interact. And I'm interacting more with the narrative folks because of my blending of genres in my film. And so with the festival coming up at the end of April, a lot of industry comes through. So the goal is just to have a short 2 to 3 minute, sizzle of something to show, like a small vignette, and just be able to talk about the sort of overarching story of what the arc is going to be and how we're going to approach different vignettes with different blending of different styles.
Nice. It's awesome to hear your energy and excitement at this stage because we've talked to a lot of filmmakers today and there's often a lot of warning signs about how hard it is to make a film, right? And how challenging the process is. So your positivity is very welcomed as an anecdote. Not to diminish how tough it is too, but it should be
Yeah,
fun, right? It should be fun, it should
right.
be exciting, it should be invigorating, and I feel that from you, which is great.
Trust me. I mean, I was just dealing with, you won't believe, like, they make women who are doing this by themselves go through psych evaluations, which is so infuriating to be like, so I could just go get pregnant and nobody cares. But if I want to do it in the most intentional way possible, you're going to put these, bureaucratic blocks in my way. And it was frustrating talking to the clinic. And I was so angry. But very quickly, I try to ground myself and remind me, this is just material for the film, okay? Just process it, writing it down, and it actually helps. I'm laughing not because I'm overlooking the fucking frustration that I had to deal with, but literally that's where I'm like so grateful for storytelling because I'm like this helps me process this stuff, and not just for me, for all these other people. Like there's so many women in the group who are just they have their one job, and they're trying to do this, trying to become moms, and I'm like this is so rough for you. And I'm so grateful I have this outlet, this creative outlet to process it. So yeah, I definitely what is it? They say sometimes you get to appreciate the beauty of the struggle and be grateful for the
Yeah.
struggle.
So I wanted to ask you about just the nature of filmmaker community. And you're in the Bay Area, and there's a lot of great organizations in the Bay Area, a lot of filmmakers there. What are some of the pros and cons of being in a community like that where there is a lot of filmmaking going on? And like, what do you have to share about the power of community through film?
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, as human beings, connection and community is truly what we're wired for. That is everything. And so I am, as you can tell, but more of an extrovert and social person. Filmmaking can be isolating. So I look for opportunities during the week to be able to go out and be in community with other people because I just need that. My personality needs that more. But if you don't have that in film in your area, like don't be deterred. Like just find it in any way possible. So for example, yes, there is a lot of film folks around, and I'm especially grateful for the fellowship that I had, the 2 year fellowship in which I made the film, because a lot of those folks are local, and I found community with them. But a lot of organizations in film have issues, right? Have deep problematic issues. Sometimes they're very helpful, but a lot of the times it's a lot of lip service. It's so much more you can see that they can do that they're not doing, and it's really discouraging at times. So I've actually started to keep a healthy distance from some of them and be like, all right, where can I go to have opportunities to share my work with industry or other folks? And you can do that by visiting and attending a festival, once or twice a year, depending on what stage your film is at. Um, but I try to find that community now in other places. So my main two things that I do is rock climbing and salsa dancing. And I found meetup groups through which I literally went where none of my friends like to do these activities, but physical, I hate going to the gym and I know I need to keep myself physically and emotionally fit starting this fertility, not only starting the fertility process, but just in general. And so those two things also, like on the week on a regular basis, keep me really grounded and allow me to shed a lot of the frustrations of what the world puts on us every on the daily. Um, so find what works for you, I would say, and sort of, keep trying different things if one is not working, but push yourself to be in community and stay connected to others. It's helpful to have places like SF Film and Bayback and other folks around. At times they're very cliquish, and at times they make people not feel welcome. And I, it's discouraging at times. And at times you figure out, what do I really need from this event? That what can it really offer to benefit my film? How can I be strategic? So, do the best you can. Some of that stuff, during the pandemic, we realized a lot of these festivals could do virtual stuff, and we did meet a lot of people virtually. And a lot of the rest is hustle. Don't be afraid to write cold emails, ask for help, ask questions, research what someone does, to find ways to connect with them. So you can connect in different ways. But
Yeah.
just push yourself to stay connected and find community and create and nurture those connections.
Yeah. No, well said. I feel like you're like a master of the hustle. You're really good at networking and especially at film festivals. Like what advice would you give to people that are, in that phase of trying to drum up interest or pitch their projects, like um going to a festival for the first time? Like what have you learned through going through that process? What's worked for you?
Yeah, Nick is overselling me, guys. He's just seen me. I think True Falls is where we met, right, Nick? Where I
Yeah,
think
yeah, exactly.
where I was very much in push mode. But so here I think part of that comes from not just my percent, it comes from the immigrant hustle. I saw my parents do this. When you move to a new country, you know nobody. How do you create connections to create opportunities for work and to be able to attain your American dream or whatever that is for you, right? Or the American fairy tale. It's more of a nightmare nowadays. But and then I went to Berkeley for undergrad. So I say that because I was surrounded by people where I saw people do this. So Berkeley, we don't just apply to get into the university. After 2 years, you have to apply to get into the major. And there's a chance you can get rejected and not major in what you want to major in. So I was around all these hustlers and type A folks who were just go-getters. And watching them, I was like, in order to survive, some of those skills rubbed off. And I, took what I needed. But you can apply these skills. They're very transferable. So how do you get into festivals? They're expensive to attend, right? They all need volunteers. I was a photographer, so everybody I realized over the years wanted to be friends, even when they weren't friends with me, because they wanted free photos. I'll ask a festival if they need a volunteer for photography. I just got an all access pass to True and Falls as a photographer to get into, and then you do the few works that they want you to do, and then that all access pass got me everywhere. And so I got into all the parties. And I understand some people, it's not easy to talk to folks, so find a partner who is, or find ways to like break the ice, go talk to people. You never know who you're going to meet at these things. So they made a big difference. Just using that same thing that I was using in university to get recruitment interviews, to get jobs, to then try to go to festivals and meet people in the industry to find, what opportunities lay out there. Because you can't just blindly apply for things. You can, sometimes they will work, but it's very, very rare. You really have to create those and create the opportunity even when it doesn't exist. So volunteer is one way to get in for free or cheaper at places. Um, what else can I say? So I did that a lot during the pandemic when we couldn't do any of that. There was virtual stuff. I emailed programmers, asked questions, offer what you can in exchange. And yeah, just you gotta ask others what worked for them. After
Yeah.
one of these, I did this last week for the fellowship that I was in. They're doing a new thing for some of the others, and I said, I'm happy to share what I've learned. One woman messaged me. We just had a 30-minute conversation, and we had all these overlapping things that we had done and how we can potentially help each other moving forward. Just sharing resources. She worked in brand marketing before. I'm trying to figure out the brand side of things as I am in development, trying to figure out impact now early to incorporate that into the development phase. So talk to people about what stuff worked for them at different phases of stories. Find stories like the ones you're telling, read the film credits, reach out to those people, like find unique ways to find connections. And if you don't know, just talk to people and ask. You never know. Like some people really care about sharing. Some people are tight-lipped, but you'll be surprised. But you won't know until you ask. So
Yeah, really great tips. Um, so on the other side of it, on the just creative side of filmmaking, what advice would you give to people that are kind of on the verge of wanting to tell a story? You know, they have some ideas, but they haven't, taken that leap of faith yet. Like what, based on just what you've learned, the success you've had in the mistakes you've made, what advice would you give to people that are just starting out?
yeah, sometimes, I mean, I do this still, so I can't say I've realized this and overcome it. It's just an important reminder to remind yourself that some stories sound great and you'll jump in and then you won't have the motivation to push it forward. That's when it really helps to have at least one type of team member on board who cares equally about that and can maybe push you a little and you can switch off some responsibilities. So having a partner on these things always helps, which I know how much it would help me. It's still hard to find good partners. I still haven't found the perfect partner to work with and collaborate with, but short-term collaborations can also help. So, if you have a story you like, sometimes just make something small with your phone, and try to put it together like as a 2 to 3 minute cut type thing. The Betty Reed Soskin, if you go on my website, you will see a Betty Reed Soskin film, a short, tintype portrait video, which was I think 2 or 3 minutes. A friend of mine made a tintype portrait of this lady, Betty Reed Soskin, and I just accompanied him and said, that'd be really cool to just talk to her. And she blew me away with her first interview. And now I'm a director and producer on a film about her life story. So you never know where things are going to go. And all I did was shoot the interview and shoot the behind the scenes while he was making a tintype of her. It still took me 4 months to get that piece cut because I didn't find the right editor, but then I did. She didn't want money because I was like, look, I just shot this. She goes, this is so cool. And together we edited that little bit, put it up. Our names are on it, her portfolio, my portfolio. And that led me to this long journey where I ended up being a director and producer on this film about her life story. So you really never know, but try to just small goals to accomplish and don't worry about perfectionism. I mean, when you see that little piece, you'll be like, oh, this is really well done. And I was trying to be a perfectionist and it took 4 to 5 months. I could have done it in two, but still, get it done, put it out there. You never know where things like that are going to lead. So whatever story draws you, just take that angle in. Photography drew me, a tintype portrait drew me. So I was like, oh, I'll just make that little behind the scenes, how to make a tintype with this cool woman. And then this whole other thing unraveled. Um, so yeah, find little things and try to do quick turnarounds, small tasks, small goals, quick turnarounds. Eventually that'll lead you. And sometimes for a lot of stories, I did that and it totally pushed me away. I was like, all right, I made a little thing, but it's not my thing. That was not something that, was going to suck you in. You could think, and things you don't think will work out really do sometimes. So just keep an open mind. But the goal is to keep creating. Even if you're just making photos and not videos, keep creating if you can. And nowadays with our phones, it's not even about having the nice camera on you. Phone's enough.
Yeah. No, well, it's well put. Sometimes it's about actually figuring out what you don't want to make along the process too. So, Well, I want to open it up to the group to ask some questions. Does anyone want to start? Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's so great to hear about the hustle. I'm curious about what you said about finding different formats for work really resonated with me. I'm a sculptor and I'm working with building a documentary about a series of work that I'm making. And I'm curious about exhibition spaces as spaces for film presentation. And do you have crossover with short narrative, in particular in museum spaces as well as film festival spaces? And have you found crossover between like the fine art world and the film world?
You know, I actually started looking for that because I come from a photography. My interest was in photography first, and then I started shooting medium format and fine art film photography was sort of like, oh, that's what I want to do. And you know, it's expensive, so the museum space was always something that I was like wanted to learn more about, but it's also a very unsafe space for people of color or not very welcoming space over the years. So museums are really fast. I made a small film about a museum exhibit, about the first contemporary art museum exhibit of all Sikh artists in America that had never happened. It happened in 2019, or early 2020 before the pandemic. So when I made this film with Dana, again, I was like, museums. And surprisingly, a lot of them weren't that interested. But then once the film was made and MTV came on board and got some, then MOAD, Museum of African Diaspora in San Francisco, showcased the film on Martin Luther King Day. Again, it took a while for that partnership to, ending up happening, but stay in touch. I would say definitely. There's definitely a lot of crossover. Museums show films all the time now. It's another way for them to get people in. It's more, dynamic, interactive. They understand attention spans. So I haven't had the biggest luck, but I have always been fascinated with that space. And then for this next project, my goal as I document, personal stories, is to also create a photo book as an ancillary to the film. And my goal is to do a small exhibit and and develop those relationships early. It's just the bureaucracy again with museums. It takes a long time to develop those relationships and have things pan out. But there definitely is crossover. There's another film that my teacher at the script writing class just showed because he's a producer on it. I'll find the link and share it with Nick, but you should check that out. They did an exhibit on the film first, a little unrelated to the exhibit, this Native American story. And it's fascinating to me to figure out ways and how you can have, and a lot of that funding for that film came from the art world because one of the co-directors is known in the art world. And so, yeah, there's definitely a lot of fascinating ways of crossover in the space. But again, that's where you need a little bit of a business mindset and almost someone or producer or partner who just is interested in trying to create those entrepreneurial connections and crossovers with people, but that's almost a dedicated job. So for a filmmaker to do that by themselves while trying to make a film is so hard. Like filmmaking is a team sport. So please pick your team well. And it's hard sometimes picking team members. You end up having to do a lot of the heavy lifting yourself, but it can definitely be done. And there's definitely room for it.
Thank you so much.
Other questions?
I wanted to ask, when you're making your film or you're being creative, and in your career so far, how have you ever dealt with failure or disappointment?
Every day, man. It's like a daily routine. What are you talking about? It's become a daily meditation now. That's what I feel like. It's like you end up having to, there are times when it'll just get you down and I shut down, and some days I don't get much done. I'm like, all right, today's just a day to take a bath and eat some chocolate and refocus. And because at times it's discouraging and disappointing and you don't have gas in the tank. I had to really do the work in therapy during the pandemic because I come from that finance background where they made us feel like if we're not working and producing 8 hours a day, we're failures, we're useless. And it's bullshit to uncondition ourselves from that, to be like, I accomplished 3 little things today, and that was a good day's work, and I'm good. So to learn to be gentle with myself, yeah, that has really helped dealing with disappointments and brush them off. And enough synchronicity, as I told you in my opening story, has happened where I'm just like, this is all pushing me towards something better, you know? Um, during this personal process journey, I asked 2 of my good friends to potentially be donors, and like they were dudes who were so scared to even talk to me about it. I'm like, bro, you're my friend. It's not a big deal. Like, next, I'll move on. But like that process was so tricky for them that it was so disappointing. It could hurt my relationships on the personal side. On the professional side, yeah, these people are assholes sometimes. So the you'll see the when you follow like the fellowships and grants go to people in the cliques. It's not going to stories that should be told always, or people who are deserving. It's like, oh, they already made successful films, let's give them more stuff. And it's like, be more inclusive, right? Like the American fiction director said, or writer said at the Oscars, like, freaking, with that same money you could tell 20 more stories, like, instead of just telling one, like, to the guaranteed person. So there are times when it's so disappointing to see that stuff, but you brush it off, be like, it's pushing me towards something better. And like now I like won the lottery with my friend who said yes to being a donor. And I'm like, thank God those losers said no, So there's enough of that has happened that I keep reminding myself. So remind yourself from these connections, like this disappointment's happening because a better door is going to open and something better is going to pivot. Like the pandemic delayed the start of Alive in Bronze because I was just going to make a story about Dana changing careers because I thought that was cool. But then she got this, and I was like, that's the story I needed to tell. So thank God a little bit of delay led to something better. So it's a constant reminder, work in progress. Remind yourself it's all happening for the best. There's a bigger plan. You just don't see it yet.
Other questions?
You mentioned you had a background in photography, and I'm a photographer myself. So I was wondering if you could speak more about how you then transitioned into filmmaking and, if your photography informs that at all.
Yeah, of course. I mean, how we compose one frame, like the power of one frame, I think is still stronger than anything else because that will hang on the walls. A film cannot hang on the wall, right? But it has a different value with the silver screen. So how you learn to compose a shot, how you learn to see things. I know like eventually when I started, the Canon 5D Mark II is what allowed me to go from photographer to filmmaker. The button that said video, I just turned on and shot video just like I was framing my photos, was what got me a lot of work. I initially, Nick might tell you, became an international wedding photographer. I got flown out to shoot weddings because, I used to shoot photos in a very unconventional way because I didn't go to school and didn't learn the rules. So I just saw it the way I liked. And then I started making video in the same way. And films weren't shot, wedding films were not shot that way. They were shot with these still cameras and like Veritas doc style. And it was like, I got in there really personally with like close up handheld movement shots. So when that transitioned me to video, I had to learn to edit, which was another journey. But how I framed those shots and the fact that my films looked like my photo frames, they told me later, a cinematographer told me, he goes, natural light photographers make some of the best cinematographers because they learn to work with available light and learn to frame things. And that transition allows people to see the story and feel it in a whole different way. Like I would sit in the audience and watch people's faces when they're watching a live, and those fire shots and the bronze pouring when the fire came out. I went to the foundry 3 times to get that shot, and just stayed still and didn't move when the fire blew up. It's like patience and how to see things. Like people would just be like, "Oh, that's beautiful," and I'm like, "Yes, I want the story to be impactful. I still wanted to move you just that little frame, right?" So yeah, it definitely makes us better storytellers. And for people who are scared of film cameras, some of my friends who are filmmakers don't shoot anything. I want a cinematographer. And I'm like, just start taking photos with your phone, you know? But like learn to see things in different ways. So yeah, it makes a huge difference, which I'm very grateful for. That, you know, I sometimes don't have to wait for the best cinematographer now. I'm just gonna go out and get the shots. And then you can always reshoot better. You guys heard of that film, All That Breeds, that was nominated for the Oscars last year? Man, those guys in India shot for a year and a half and then got all this funding, threw out the footage and hired an amazing DP and then reshot. But like that practice of how to see the story and how to refine the story made that film so much better eventually. You know, they got the money and they made it into this whole new thing. And some of my friends then were like, every shot is so beautiful. It's fucking pretentious. That's a backlash too that some docs have, right? Everything doesn't have to look beautiful, has to be in the moment, but whatever approach you take. But yeah, as a photographer, we're definitely blessed to have that training early on to how to see stories and how to make people feel them. But then there's, you know, make sure you don't rely on just the beauty of it, learn to construct the story. That's the biggest, hardest thing I had to learn. I'm still learning because I haven't mastered it, where they're like, don't shoot anything, just do the interview, build the story arc just on the audio, edit. And I'm like, that's freaking hard. But yeah, that's another thing that I have to learn to do as I create these vignettes for my personal stories. Like, no visual, just audio first, build the story arc, the spine, then go get visuals. Beba is a good example of that. Although the story and the character were very narcissistic, and they actually call themselves that, and I was like, good thing you recognize you're a narcissist. But that editor did such a brilliant job, you know, piecing her random thoughts with random visuals, but it's like so beautiful how it comes together. So like getting that audio spine and then working in visuals, but then again, knowing how to build beautiful visuals or capture them and then weave them together is another skill. But yeah, we're definitely blessed.
I'm glad you mentioned that reshooting story. I think a lot of people don't realize how much reshooting happens to finish a film. Like, and it could be such a spectrum. You could reshoot the whole film. I've heard of that in other cases. Like, or you fill in, once you've edited your story, you fill in all these gaps that you had, you know. So
Right.
yeah, you
Transitions and visually, you know, and then again, you're going back and forth from telling the story audio wise versus visually, right? And that marriage is so important.
yeah, absolutely. Other questions for AK? Anyone? Well, this was so great. Thank you for making the time, sharing your wisdom and your story with us. Really, really appreciate it. Do you have any closing thoughts or anything else you want to share before we wrap?
Yeah, I mean, you know, good luck with what you all are doing. Nick is amazing. I've seen him kind of grow over the past few years, and it's like so awesome to see people's journey blossoming with their stories and the space we create for other artists and creators. I mean, I think our stories are so important, and how we process life. To me, I've truly found that to be one of the biggest benefits. So just realize how much of a privilege this is that we get to do this, as hard as it is at times. It's much better than the hardness of staying in a job that's just soulless, or being able to balance and deal with it while we tell these important stories. So I'm grateful that we get to do that. I would love to see any films that you guys have made. Please feel free to email me or whatever, you know, through this process as you go on and make new things. Feel free to reach out if you need any help, any questions you have that come up later. I'm happy to share what I've learned. And yeah, thanks again for having me, making time.
Yeah, and people can watch Alive in Bronze, you said, on Paramount Plus, and could they can rent it on Amazon too, is that right?
Yeah. So you can get a free trial of Paramount Plus through Amazon, and to watch it. But you know, please leave a review if you can. It's just helpful to have these things out there to get. But yeah, if you haven't seen it yet, please see it, and try to leave a review. And yeah, I look forward to seeing what you guys create. And I can't wait for Nick's film too. Nick,
It's
get on
coming.
it.
It's coming soon. All right, round of applause, everyone, for AK. Thank you, AK.
You guys, thanks again for making time. This was so much fun.